on November 9th, 2023. It's wonderful to have you all join us today. We have three presentations today. We have, hold on, where are my speakers? We have Tammy Fisher, who's one of the winners of the Best Overall Award of our second Large Language Models in the Law hackathon we ran back in September. And she will present Discover AI project, which is a privacy-focused LLM focused on next generation e-discovery tools. And then we have Chase Brignac, who is the CEO and co-founder of Chat Open Source, which is an open source chat alternative to OpenAI for startups and enterprises. We're very curious to hear about that too, especially after the recent demo of OpenAI. I'm very curious to hear your presentation. And then last but not least, we have Alana Karen, who is the author of Adventures of Women in Tech and a director at Google, who will be presenting her latest work on women in tech. So three great presentations on a variety of different topics today. We have an hour, so each one of the presenters has about 20 minutes, but please, leave a little bit of time for Q&A, as we have a pretty curious group. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Tammy, who's gonna kick it off. Right, over to you, Tammy.
Awesome. All right, everyone. So as mentioned, my name's Tammy. I'm a former corporate attorney, moved tech in-house counsel, and was fortunate enough to participate in the last Stanford Law School CodeX hackathon, which I basically worked with a few other awesome teammates during the hackathon. It was about like a 18-hour period of building, and we actually came up with kind of the first steps of our what's going to be a prototype called Discover AI. So I know the crowd here is pretty diverse, so I'm going to touch on some, of course, legal topics, but also technical topics that might provide some context to like what we're thinking about with Discover AI. So just walking it through it, I'm sure a lot of you know what LLMs are. They're all throughout the media. A huge topic that was the focus of our hackathon was knowledge graphs. And some of the limitations surrounding both of these interesting technical resources for the law. And then I'll move into a bit about our flow for Discover AI. So this is super general, but pretty much with large language models, there's been huge movements when it comes to the typical, maybe you have a subscription to ChatGPT, you answer a question on a general knowledge topic, it searches the internet and it gives a really nice response. Something that's becoming very popular right now in the legal tech space is the idea of a RAG model. So this actually is a kind of hybrid model that uses a corpus of data, so a finite sense of data. This could be really, I think, relevant for a lot of attorneys out there when we get a case file and we have evidence in a case, and it's kind of this closed source world we're living in, and we need to really know that information. So retrieval augmented generation, kind of the long-term word for RAG, is a frequently used tool lately in kind of the legal tech field when it comes to LLMs and AI. So limitations. As you can imagine, we're not in full self-driving car mode just yet. We still need attorneys. We still need legal paralegals and all of these people to assist us in developing cases. We can't just leave it to LLMs. Why is that? One huge issue with LLMs, based off of kind of how their databases work, is there's kind of this black box effect, and we've all heard about like the famous attorney who cited to a fake case from ChatGPT, that hallucination issue. A few other issues is like deep legal reasoning and understanding context, as well as just like how LLMs are trained, which is like super based off of like patterns in language. So sometimes depending on like how you ask a question, you can get a very large range of responses. So that's LLMs. Another topic I want to kind of bring in here that maybe some of you in the e-discovery space could be familiar with is knowledge graphs. The most classic knowledge graph you could think of is like Wikipedia. It's a source of information, kind of like an encyclopedia that has all these connecting points. Usually they're very finite in the amount of knowledge it has. but it can be extremely accurate. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how Discover AI basically uses the context of LLMs and knowledge graphs to kind of create we like to call it a legal AI Sherpa. So this is a legal AI agent. Problem. We all know about the piles of documents in law firms. I think some of us have had nightmares about them. They still exist today in 2023. So there's a lot of solutions being based in both e-discovery and litigation and, corporate M&A, all of that, to kind of figure out ways to deal with like large amounts of data for our clients. So current e-discovery software is kind of an incomplete solution. We have algorithms, and we also have some forms of knowledge graphs, kind of like, as I referred to before, you can kind of create these like contextual relationships between different people and different entities to kind of figure out large amounts of data. Kind of talking to attorneys in the space of late, there's definitely an AI arms race when it comes to how to deal with not only this large amount of data and how can we have like maybe an AI assistant review the data, but also in the idea of basically how to reduce repetitive tasks with AI. Because though I love being a lawyer, there's a lot of late nights that maybe could have been shortened and I could have gotten to bed earlier if there were some less repetitive tasks and how I had to review evidence in preparation for a case. So there's tons of interest, data sets galore in huge law firms to train models, which is great. And the main thing is there's just a lot of hesitation around the privacy factors with, attorney-client privilege, and then the reliability of the information, which is kind of what we rest our hat on when it comes to being in the legal profession. So that said, the natural place that I think a lot of tech entrepreneurs and legal technologists are in is they're thinking, okay, how can we kind of be the SDK for legal LLMs? And when I say SDK, it's like software development kit, meaning this is your go-to LLM and you can kind of plug and play, meaning maybe you fine tune it a little bit, but you can use this tool basically to, in our particular context, as an e-discovery and legal reasoning tool for litigation. So specifically what we're interested in is having an LLM agent that basically interacts with a knowledge graph. So a knowledge graph, the cool thing now with LLMs and knowledge graphs is there's a way for knowledge graphs to become much more flexible with giving it a corpus of information, of evidence. So I'm an attorney, I get a case, I get my legal matter and I have a bunch of evidence I need to review. Let's turn that evidence via an LLM into a knowledge graph that can actually have contextual reasoning built in. And then you kind of have this interplay with the LLM agent and the knowledge graph to basically build off of each other to work through evidence to answer really important questions about your case. So this is a little bit more specific, but there's actually a lot of progress right now when it comes to legal reasoning, just reasoning in general in LLMs and how you prompt and really getting to like specific information regarding in-text citations to get real accuracy in your documents and what the LLM's telling you about the evidence that you're presenting it. So as I mentioned, our legal AI Sherpa, I'll walk you through it right now, but we're talking about a situation where you receive a case. I was a white-collar criminal defense attorney. Sometimes I had to review a lot of evidence and I wanted to know, just basic things about like what's going on in the case. How can a legal AI Sherpa help you with that? So first things first is, you create your matter. Well, who's your client? We use the Enron corpus for our particular purposes, and it's what we're kind of working with right now for building our prototype. Who's the opposing party, other parties? Now, just let's provide some context. We still need the attorney to provide some general information about what the case is about. So maybe there's some just high level stuff you wanted to know. Next thing, two things that we can, from a context perspective, that are really important here is it's not just like asking a question like, what's in the evidence on the Enron case? The thing that you want to do is give it things like the complaint, any client notes you have on what's important in the case. And then that information can then be used to review the evidence in the case to see what pops out. Next thing is guiding the LLM based off of the claims in your case. So a claim in the Enron case was fraud. We all know that fraud is a term of art, or some of us do, but fraud's a term of art. So with fraud there's multiple elements that you need to meet to actually find someone guilty of fraud, right? Again, terms of art like material misrepresentation. So we want to give the LLM as much information as possible to break down these terms, to then review the evidence and see what supports or doesn't support my client being potentially guilty of fraud. So once we kind of go back and do this legal AI Sherpa LLM knowledge graph back and forth, the first thing that we can produce is a timeline of all the relevant evidence with summarization. And on the right side here, the main thing that I would like to note and that we're working on right now is some issue spotting identification of elements from a claim. So it's not just about organizing things based off summarization. It's also saying, hey, kind of like a first level associate, this particular document may be interesting to you because there's some misrepresentations regarding financials, things like that. And this just helps the attorney know the general idea of the case, but also start getting into some of the legal issues. One next step from there is that, based on that citation, you can basically go to the document and look into that document with some highlights saying, this document has the particular area regarding fraud or the LLM thinks might be relevant to your case. So that's kind of the flow. And I know that was a lot of information and I'd love your questions. And thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. This is great. I was wondering if you could just kind of go back a little bit to the beginning of your presentation, explain again sort of like how you orchestrate the use of knowledge graphs versus the LLM, and is the knowledge graph part of the retrieval augmentation? You create the knowledge graph first and then you kind of feed it into the LLM, or how do these things kind of interact with each other?
So this is something that we're currently working on. The really interesting thing is actually LLMs can create knowledge graphs if you feed it information. So this is a bit of a different model than the RAG model because just the database itself is different. So what we would do is actually have it just relate to one another. So you still have the LLM and you could still use a RAG model in the LLM because that's where you get that corpus of text. But instead of just working within that text, which has some limitations. For example, RAG sometimes looking for a falsehood, for example, one document in a fraud case doesn't have a falsehood, right? You have a statement where someone is saying, I'm making a lot of money, but in reality, there's another document saying they're not making a lot of money. So you need two documents to prove this misrepresentation, right? So RAGs sometimes have problems with that. That's where you can basically have an LLM as an agent, basically rebound off of a knowledge graph and say, okay, what are the connections here between one financial statement from October 2001 and a statement made by the CEO from October 2001. So this is something we're still working on. It's not by any means a perfect science. There's a lot. It's kind of just I would say a moving target right now in the space. But that's the idea, is it kind of rebounds off of each other, and you can kind of build into different prompting techniques of both like chain of thought and also step back prompting are two things we're exploring right now in order to build from like questions answered based off of like a legal AI agent. That was a lot of information, but does that kind of explain?
Yeah, I think I got it. And it sounds it could be useful to the Attorney General in New York with some of the correct communication going on. But anyway, so Rajan is saying multiple vendors addressing the space like Harvey, etc. How do you differentiate yourself from these other vendors?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say that our main differentiator currently is that we're really trying to focus on the complex litigation space. I wouldn't say that we're like a full suite service for all law firms at this time. I'm not too specifically clear on what Harvey's doing other than like fine tuning LLMs and for like big law. And I'm assuming they're exploring a lot of different like modeling for that. But yeah, mainly really right now, we're just trying to focus on like one extreme vertical, which is complex litigation and evidence review.
Great. Luciana is asking, she said, wonderful project, Tammy, congrats. Does it depend on users' input for updating, or is it automating the legal data's access?
Oh, that's a great question. So definitely from current practices, like LLMs are by nature somewhat slow. Like you kind of need to like upload and then take a step back and come to it. So if you get new evidence in a case or you have a new client meeting, those should be separately updated to basically update the knowledge graph, update what's contextually important to your case.
Got it. Pedro has a question. Pedro, you can just unmute yourself so we can hear you. Pedro, are you there? Okay, well, okay, so let me see. Maybe I need to unmute you. So let me see if I find you here.
To unmute now.
Okay, try again, please, Pedro.
Perfect. Now I can unmute. Do
Oh,
you hear me?
great. We can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Well, in this kind of interaction, it's very interesting when you have this kind of form where you can pick certain options, and given those options, you get a certain level of guidance, legal guidance. And my question is, have you thought about how to protect the confidentiality of your clients? Because I don't know if something like that is going to be protected by the Client Lawyer Confidentiality Act, or if it's something that eventually could be used against the client, like when somebody uses your browser history as part of the evidence in a trial. I have that problem with some ideas, and I wanted to know, how are you approaching that?
That's a really great question. So there's even now the American Bar Association has some guidance and rules regarding LLMs using client information. So one thing that's pretty common is, first of all, you can create like a privacy focused solution. So the LLM that we'd like to use, or that we are using, is Llama. So it's 13B Llama for those interested. So that's an open source LLM, and it can be fine-tuned, and it also can kind of be boxed out either through like an on-premises solution or through like Azure, other cloud kind of encrypted source services that the law firms are already comfortable with using. Would be some like first steps to make sure that, like with RAG and with knowledge graphs, you can keep it as closed world where you don't have to interact with the internet, if that makes sense. So that would be the main thing to do, is kind of like close that silo. Aside from that, you definitely need all types of permissions and any retainer agreement saying that you're using AI in order to review the evidence of the case.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's see. Das is asking, well, actually, Aditya is saying Llama is not an open source license. I thought it was, but I don't know. But Dasa says, what guidance and rules does the ABA have created to the use of LLMs? I'm aware of some states making progress on that, among other organizations, but not yet the ABA.
Yeah, so this was actually the first I had heard about it was through CaseText, if any of you all use it. So I was a client of CaseText, and so their explanation to me and my subsequent review of it is that it basically they keep everything in a silo, kind of how I described it, like a siloed format. So you can't let private attorney-client information touch the internet. That's my quick and dirty way of describing it.
Got it. All right, so yeah, so unfortunately we only have like 20 minutes for each speaker, and we're pretty much there at this point. But Tammy, if you could share your contact information, if folks have any follow-up questions, that would be great. You could just put it in the chat here. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And this is a really cool project. And please keep us posted.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you again. Now over to you, Chase.
Hi, I am Chase. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So, all right, can everyone see my browser?
Yes.
Yay. All right. So, I'm Chase, and I want to ask you a very simple question. What if you could use ChatGPT in your law firm? That's kind of the aim of our company, Chat Open Source. We work with enterprises, and we have We have better security practices, better privacy practices than OpenAI. The problem is that enterprises need those privacy and security considerations that OpenAI doesn't necessarily have. For big startups, enterprises, and governments, it's just not private or secure enough. In fact, there's a lot of enterprises that are set to ban ChatGPT. I was working with a very large law firm. I won't say who, but if I said the name, you would all know the name. I'm working with like 8 or 9 lawyers there. A redacted lawyer at a redacted law firm that said, we want to use ChatGPT, but we can't because it's external. And in fact, they want to use Harvey, but they can't because it's external only. It's a cloud service. And they were showing me physically at their desk, showing me the current solution that they have, which is called Lega AI. It is based on a very old model from OpenAI. It makes you, it pops up with this annoying privacy policy of like, hey, don't put anything sensitive into Lega AI. If you're gonna, chat about something, it better not be privileged. It better not be sensitive. Well, a lot of the things that law firms work on are privileged and sensitive. Lega AI is not a solution that really works well for lawyers. They need to be able to do very basic things. I mean, this is not rocket science, like chat with docs, right? If you can upload a doc and you can chat with it, that would be very useful for a lawyer. If you could do this on premise, that would be very useful for a lawyer because that means you can use it with sensitive documents. If you can give citations when you chat with your docs so that you can read the passages, the chatbot will actually say, here's the answer, and here are the passages with citations so that you can go and you can double check the answer. That's not rocket science. It's not something that's available with OpenAI or with Harvey or with Lega AI, our competitors. And we can do this. So we chat with docs on-prem. We give answers with citations. We allow you to upload contracts, documents, etc. We respect your security and your privacy, and we offer these automated services for you. We offer a cloud platform, and we offer an on-prem platform. We suspect a lot of law firms will go for the on-prem platform. It's not a very complicated solution. We essentially put a RAG vector database and a GPU in your office, and we maintain it for you. This is not that expensive, not for a law firm anyway. And we have the background necessary to do this. So my background is I'm a second-time founder. I'm a former NASA engineer, and I was in YC in the S-22 batch. And I also worked for a company called Deliv that was acquired by Target, and I was responsible for building the same-day delivery program at Target. So I know enterprise software really, really well, and I know the security and privacy needs of these companies. I understand how to build infrastructure and build it in a way that is going to respect your privacy and your security. And my co-founder, who is very dutifully chugging away on code right now, he's not in this presentation. He's a second-time founder as well. He specializes in security, scale, and AI as well. He was working at Bristol-Myers Squibb. He was working at Rapid7 in the past, and he's a Techstars founder himself. And then I just wanted to end the presentation, I know we don't have a lot of time, with a very interesting snippet from OpenAI's enterprise privacy policy. This is an enterprise privacy policy that allows specialized third-party contractors. But don't worry, they're bound by confidentiality and security obligations, right? And they only use it for abuse and misuse. Who are these third-party contractors? Where are they? The privacy policy doesn't say. It's insane, right? There's a reason why a lot of lawyers don't use OpenAI. It's because it's very simple. They don't have an on-prem option. They don't have citations. They don't allow you to chat with large corpuses of documents internal to your office. And then for fun, I asked ChatGPT about its own privacy policy. And this is what it had to say about OpenAI's privacy policy. And then I could also close with a demo. We're actually launching with our first customer on Monday. And so we'll be onboarding our first 110 users with our first 2 enterprises on Monday. And we're working with law firms now to design a product for them and design a product for you ultimately. So this is our demo so far. Essentially, we can create chatbots here. So here's an example of, I went to the Crowell and Mooring website and I took their documents from their public website and uploaded it to my bot. And then I asked things like, tell me about the executive order and how it relates to China. And then it just kind of gives you a list. And very soon we'll have citations out of this. We're planning on rolling out citations next week. And if I want to create a new bot, it's very easy to do. I can say, you know, Apple insurance bot. And then I can, let's see, I can create that here. Edits. Okay, here. So now we've got our bot, and then I can upload a document. And then the upload mode takes a second. And then my US Apple PPO plan, I can upload that, and it's creating a vector database now. So we can chat with it. We can ask questions. So it's spitting out a bunch of information that I really didn't ask for. So I'll change that. But I can ask something like, does Apple insurance cover therapy? I don't know. See what it says. Yeah, that's good. And then it spits out some information about the copay. So yeah, that's Chat open source. And if you guys want to talk more about it, I'd love to talk with you. And my email address is here, chase@chatopensource.com. I'll
Awesome.
put the chat as well.
Great, thank you, Chase. Yeah, thank you for your concise presentation. There's a lot. I think there's a lot to unpack. And one of the questions I have is with you saying that the challenge for law firms is you worry about the confidentiality of your data and all of that. And so the use case you showed is basically targeting the chatbot onto firm internal documents, right? But part of the excitements around using generative AI is also it's sort of taking into account or bringing in other knowledge and information that's external to your to the boundaries of your organization. And how do you kind of make that trade-off or find that balance for sort of the law firm environment? And is it sort of can you turn it on or off, or is it exclusively now just focused on firm internal data? How do you think about that?
So I didn't get too far into the demo, into the weeds, because I didn't want to get into the weeds, but we can actually chat with external resources as well. So there is a feature, maybe I could share my screen and show it, but I'll just describe it. I could put in a website, for example, and it will go out and fetch the website and bring it back to me and have that in context. Or you can ask it to do a Google search and it will go out on the web and it will do a Google search for you and use that as context for your chat conversation. So, and we do anticipate with the first law firms that we work with that they're going to want to have things like chat with such and such corpus, right, from external sources. I think the important bit is to have your vector database internal, to have the model running internal, and to be able to pull these resources in and keep them internally so that when you're chatting, that there's nothing going external to the law firm, right? So that you can respect the privacy and security of your clients, right? If you've got privileged information or secure information that you want to keep internal, then we can do that for you. Cool. Even with external things, right?
Yeah. Miriam's asking you, how come you view sort of the law firms as an exciting kind of industry for your approach?
Wait, what's the question again?
How you come you are targeting law firms in particular? Is the question.
It's not law firms in particular. So our first enterprise customers are actually in the consulting space that have fintech clients, and they have very similar reservations to the law firms that we talk to. We're also talking to people in the defense industry, though I don't think the defense industry is exactly an early adopter. So we don't anticipate working with very many defense clients. I'm sure there's more use cases out there than just legal and finance, but I mean, for now, those are the ones that we think we'll focus on. They seem to be early adopters as long as you can respect their privacy and security and willing to pay. Consumers, yeah, we've had
that's a kind of Venn diagram. So great. So Rongfei is asking, what would be your future mode if OpenAI enables enterprise level privacy and security through Microsoft Azure? And Azure is a more trusted brand for all Fortune 500 companies. And he's also pointing out that Scale AI is working with the DoD on an AI deployment.
That's a good question. Actually, I asked Sam Altman at a YC, I saw him in person a few weeks ago, if he was ever going to open source weights for the latest models. The answer is no, right? They believe that more people will use the cloud, and that if you don't want to use Microsoft's Azure, you're kind of out of luck, right? So you can have in VPC, is like the technical term. You can have like in your Microsoft cloud a version of ChatGPT, but if you don't use the Microsoft cloud, if you want to keep things internal, that's something that OpenAI is never going to do. And Scale AI, I mean, I think it's a classic question. What if, big tech company does the same thing that you're doing? And it's like, well, if you're Algolia, right, and Google goes and does what Algolia is doing, well, Algolia is kind of screwed, right? I mean, that would kind of be the case. But I think Scale AI has a very different business vertical. I think they're going to end up in a different niche. I mean, all we have to do is own a niche, maybe two, and we'll be fine,
Yes, I like the spirit. Exactly, that's the spirit. So great. So any other questions from you folks? And what sort of like the business model there? So this is the companies they buy tokens or seats, or
yes,
how does that work?
Most likely seats. So we can license the software that's on-prem. We don't open source everything. We open source our system, but not the ability for you to have enterprise grade permissions, for example. So if you're an individual who wants to use, our software and install it internally, you can do that. But if you want permissions, well, that is something we can license to you. If you want citations, like enterprise grade citations, that's something we can license to you. So I think licensed software, it's the difference between open source and open core. We are open core, which is kind of like, it's a version of open source, right? We don't open source everything. We just open source the non-enterprise features. The enterprise features will license, and you'll pay us money, and we'll deploy it, and we'll maintain it for you. A lot of these law firms that we're talking to, they don't even necessarily have engineering departments, right? They have like an innovation team that decides what's going to be deployed internally, and then they have an IT department that deploys products internally, right? So, if they want to maintain this stuff themselves, then like, I think that's a very unlikely scenario for a lot of law firms out there.
Okay, so since I don't see any other questions here, I will just keep asking my questions. So you think that this kind of retrieval focused use case that you explained, basically giving it sort of a confined set of documents to like provide context and then retrieve the right information is sort of like what people will use it most for in a law firm setting? Or do you think it's also about generating documents, briefs, contracts, or what are you hearing from your early customers at this point?
I think it will most likely be the first use case, and then eventually will bleed into the second use case. And the reason why is because if you're, trying to do like some sort of doc review or like review a contract, and you want to make like double, triple sure that there's, nothing in there that's going to, I don't know, be able to, sink the case or do XYZ, you're gonna want to use this to like double check your work, right? And when it gives you citations, you can read the passages and you can read those citations, you can double check those. If you're having ChatGPT, generate an entire legal document, I think that is coming, right? I think that people will do that. I think that I'd be surprised, you guys tell me, I don't think that there are many lawyers that do that today. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Honestly, we'll find out, won't we?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, then Peter's asking about whether you had any problems with the LLM hallucinating things that aren't really in the document at hand.
That's right. I mean, that's why the citations are so important. Hallucination has been an issue and will be an issue. I think it will get much better. There are some open source techniques we can use, such as representation engineering. I could talk all day about representation engineering. I love it. I'm a nerd. But all that's relevant for lawyers is it reduces the amount of hallucinations. But even if it's 1% chance that it's a hallucination, you're still going to want to have that citation to go double check. So that's why, people are asking for citations. We're going to put in citations like next week.
Mm-hmm. And so what would you think, if you compare yourself to Casetext CoCounsel product, what sort of like, how do you differentiate from these guys?
Sorry, which product?
Casetext has the CoCounsel.
Casetext CoCounsel. I haven't actually heard of that product. I hope that there are competitors because I haven't heard of that many. And if there aren't, then maybe I'm just crazy. I would be shocked if there are no competitors.
No, they are like, right. They were just acquired, but anyway, so I was just curious.
Congrats to them.
Yeah. Good. All right. So if there are so you already shared your contact info, I think. So folks, if you, let me see. Oh yeah, here's your email in the chat. So if anyone has any follow-up questions for Chase, please reach out to him directly. And yeah, Chase, this is very cool. Thank you so much for sharing, and yeah, please keep us posted too.
Yeah, and if people want, I see there's an ask for a web link to play with. We'll have a demo most likely live on Monday evening. So if you guys want that, just put your names in the chat and I'll send you a demo link. Put your email in the chat so that I can send you a link so that you can play around with it.
Yeah. And if you want to do a sort of a follow-up at some point, because I understand you're just deploying right now in those law firms. Mm-hmm. And if you want to do a follow-up on sort of learnings from those deployments or something, we'd love to have you back.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to be back. Yeah, it's great talking with you guys.
Great to have you. Thank you again, Chase. And now over to Alana.
Hello. Nice to see you all. I think I'm going to be changing direction on you all pretty quickly. So, because now we're just going to like sort of shift focus from this sort of more machine world back to humans and a little bit about the humans behind how we're making all the machines. And I want to talk a little bit about some stuff that I've dug into over the years about women in tech. I will say that a lot of what I'll be talking about is based on the research I did with women in tech, but I think a lot of it will resonate with you all across gender, because it's really about what motivated people to come to tech and what keeps them excited to stay. So to kick off, I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit better because it's slightly part of the story. I'm going to see whether is my stuff advancing though. First of all, am I sharing? Do you see my slides?
Yes.
It says I'm screen sharing. Okay, beautiful. All right, it's being a little funky on my side though. Okay, awesome. So sometimes when I present, I'm presenting to groups purely of women or even students in school. And so I do like to take a step back just because I think sometimes it can feel like these roles and having this kind of experience can seem really untouchable. And really the way that my background started was that I just got really nerdy about web design. And this was back when really the internet was just coming to be generally accessible, to date myself. And I was in college and just started nerding out making websites and then convincing my professors and my internships that they needed websites. And I ended up parlaying that into a first job as a webmaster, and then a second job at a startup, and then a third job at Google. But all of it was basic. I was a history major. And I think if I had not gotten super excited about aspect of technology and the ability to bring information to people in a new and exciting way, I don't think that I would be here today, because I was definitely, as a history major, focusing on things like creative writing and French. I was definitely not on a path to make money or to be in tech. So it was very much this creative aspect that brought me here. And so over the years, as I've been thinking about and seeing the journey that women have in tech, it's advancing now, everybody? I got a message it wasn't advancing. Everything advancing now?
Yes, it's
Okay. I think it's just, Google Slides. I'll blame the company. I'm still an employee here, so I can blame it. As the years have gone by and I've been navigating my career at Google, first on the business side of the company with ads and policy, what ads we would accept and what we wouldn't accept. Then at Google Fiber, building out customer support and installs, and now in Google Search as a lead of program management for infrastructure. I have, been in the back of conference rooms, sitting with women in tech, thinking about what has brought us here and what keeps us here. And it ultimately led me to write this book a few years ago, released in 2020, where I interviewed over 80 women to get a sense of what their journeys were and how they were finding their journey through tech. And I think two main things were my catalyst for this. One was that at the time, it was very of the Me Too era. And while that had been a really good era for surfacing stories that needed to be told, I was also seeing it be a big chilling effect for women thinking about joining and staying in tech, in part exacerbated by the media, who like to publish sexy articles with titles like, "Can women thrive in tech? Do women belong in tech?" And I just was pretty annoyed because, having sat with a lot of women in tech over the years, all who were growing in their careers and making good money, I really wondered who those articles were serving. And it didn't seem to be going in the direction that it was meant to be. I think the second piece of it was just feeling like I was hearing so many stories of so many women from different places, different paths, different careers, different races, and they were all finding a path. It wasn't always easy, but they were finding a journey in tech. And I wasn't seeing that story get told as much, especially people who maybe were on the non-tech side of technical companies. So anyway, I call it Google hubris after being at Google for so many years, but I decided to write the book myself. And to fast forward a little bit, I ended up finding 3 major themes from my research. And I'm just going to talk about it in brief and then hand us over to questions. And you can all dig into what areas seem most interesting to you. There were 3 main buckets. And what was really interesting is that when I was interviewing all these women, it was almost as if I'd given them a script when I would ask them the question of what brought them to tech, what intrigued them to tech. And it was 4 main buckets of answers I would get, often mixed, so that people would give me multiple from it. One was to change the world. This opportunity to come to tech and have a bigger scope or platform or ability to really change the world. A second one was correlated to their career. Where were the best opportunities? This was also an opportunity to grow themselves, to potentially have bigger scope or responsibility than they had elsewhere. A third thing that I would hear a lot in some version of it was that people, they found their people, they found their tribe. It was a culture that they vibed with, that they believed in. And the fourth element, not to be overshadowed, was because it was lucrative and it was money. And I think when we think about generational wealth, or we think about what will help people evolve their lives over time, we shouldn't be shy about saying that money matters. But sometimes women are. So money matters. And they told me in these interviews. So those 4 elements really were a very common inspiration. And what was very interesting is that when you fast forwarded, and I spoke with women who were leaving tech or who were thinking about maybe they would leave tech, it very much gave me a primer as a leader for what to pay attention to, because those very 4 things that brought them to tech were the things that later on would make them potentially consider leaving. If they somehow got into a job where now it felt so divorced from changing the world. They were just in meetings arguing about this spreadsheet or that spreadsheet, and they weren't really feeling that connection anymore. They'd stalled in their own growth for whatever reason in their company, their team. The people that they were now in a team with, they didn't seem to click with, or maybe there were bigger issues having to do with culture. And ultimately, the money was important, but sometimes all kinds of life things and the stalling of growth, et cetera, wouldn't make the money be the only factor that they would consider. And obviously, if they could find a more lucrative opportunity, that would also be something that they would consider. So they might leave you, they might not leave tech. So that kind of talks about a bit of the inspiration and the needs from folks. But what I really digged into, and what I ended up writing a second book, a workbook about, was the tools that the women had ended up using on their journey. And just to really cover those quick, and then I'll just leave the rest for questions. Those were, in no particular order: resilience. This is, lots of people talk about this, and women used all kinds of words for this: grit, like iron will. I don't know, people used all kinds of words, but this is the ability to stand back up after challenges, and in fact to get stronger because you experienced those challenges. Self-marketing, or marketing 101. Very connected, the ability to ask for what you need and want. Finding support beyond just mentors and sponsors. What is your support network? Who is your board as you navigate this journey? And lastly, somewhat gimmickly named, but I went with it, this concept of owning your awesome, of ultimately feeling, as soon as you can in your career, a sense of self-worth, and not having it take 5, 10, 20 years before you believe that you are in fact awesome and you carry that awesomeness with you. So the rest of this deck, which I'm happy to share, has stories from some of the women that I quoted from the book, but we don't have time to go through all of that. And I figured I'd just give the last 10 minutes for questions, and then we can just dig into whatever areas interest you the most for maybe some of what I heard from people.
Sounds great. Thank you, Alana. This is great. So, first question, which is by Luciana, who says, I totally agree with that. The things that attracted me to this is what's sending me away. But why wouldn't that be true for all genders? Do you have any examples? And so I think that's a good question, on that particular aspect. But more broadly, like, did you, in your survey and your interviews, was there a way for you to assess, what are sort of really very gender-specific issues versus which ones do apply across the genders?
Yeah, and honestly, I wasn't in the book. I wasn't making an argument that these were unique things. I was very much focused on what was the experience that these women were having, what were stories that they experienced. And if we were extrapolating to some degree with that against existing research, where would we say that some of this is backed by research that's already been done about, for example, how women won't apply to jobs unless they perfectly meet a majority of the criteria, versus studies show that men will, throw their hat in the ring at the 60% mark or somewhere around that. So there were connections that I made to show why some of these things the women experienced were exacerbated or maybe supported by like how we were raised or the culture or general gender divides. But I definitely didn't. In fact, you'll see in the book that I say something like this stuff can apply across genders. So it's just that I focused on women and I interviewed women. And I did that on purpose because I was seeing this buildup of pressure where potentially women in particular would feel like they didn't belong in tech.
Yeah.
But when you look at the tools that I just talked about, and when you look at what attracts people to tech, I would say there's a lot of commonality. Sometimes underneath it, if you want to pull out some gender things, because women are generally raised to support the we over the I, sometimes you do see them, but not exclusive to men, more attractive to things that help people, help society, help the we, because we have been in fact trained that way. You could get into a nature-nurture argument with me, but I don't suggest it. I don't think it's very productive. I think it's just more important to know that it's an underlying element.
It is fascinating. So I'm father of a 9-year-old daughter, and she's trying to convince herself that she's bad at math, and I think she has that from her mother. And I'm sort of trying to kind of, give her that confidence but it's like, it's almost like, there's some it's sort of like, it starts very early where you sort of perceive yourself as like not being strong in something. And even though, I think the school is doing a great job at letting everyone sort of go at their own pace and so on. But anyways, it's fascinating, this whole, all these questions. And I think some of the attributes that you mentioned here of women are raised to be more we thinkers, that those are attributes that should be, rewarded in also in the tech industry, right? And so one of the questions I had, do you see any? Because you kind of point out the tech industry as like, that was your sort of focus. But are there any things that make it special as compared to other parts of the corporate world? And that it's perhaps the entry barriers higher, or or more kind of?
Yeah, I would actually say that tech may be differentiated by the fact that we're trying. Like if you look at certain areas, agriculture, construction, like certain industries, I wouldn't say are even particularly trying.
I see.
So tech is an area where you're actually trying, and it means that you are regularly running into these issues and this discomfort. There's also a history in tech as computers came to be of women being more present and then becoming less so. So like if you think back to early computing when it was almost the more manual thing, I mean maybe you've watched Hidden Figures or whatever it is, like you're probably generally aware that there was some history here. Isn't it like Heidi Lamar's birthday or something? Anyway, you're probably generally aware of a history where women were more involved. And in the 80s, 90s, et cetera, the trajectory started to change and the numbers of graduates in science, math, et cetera, fields started to drop. So I think it's also an area where we want a redemption arc, where we believe, not just because in the numbers, but because we believe we would bring better products to market with less biases, with more power, that we need to conquer this. So I think that we are trying at the same time that it's extremely, extremely awkward. And just like someone said, it's hard to know, like you want to explain, but are you mansplaining? Like, what is it? That difficult boundary is part of what we're dealing. Whereas I do think in some industries, it's either so saturated with women, you have almost a different bias and problem if men enter it, like education, or nursing, for example, or you're tipped the other way. And so just areas like us, maybe like with medicine and some things in the middle, law, medicine, et cetera, where I think it comes up more, and we're probably in similar versions trying to find our way through it in this modern world.
I think, I mean, in law schools, I think at this point, I mean, certainly at Stanford Law School, I think we have actually more women enrolled than men at this point. Legal tech is sort of as much of tech as somewhat has less female representation. There's been lots of great women who've been, leading companies, some of the, trailblazing companies in the space. I think the ABA has a report on that, and ILTA, the International Legal Tech Association, is doing some work on that. But much more needs to be done, I think.
Well, and what I generally want to say is we're always seeing examples of strong women, but I think sometimes it can still be treated as the token. And so my whole point in the book was to say, no, 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 no. Like we've decided you have to look a certain way, or you have to be this special example. And look at all these women, and you would probably identify with some of them, right? It doesn't take a special type. You just have to believe that the first steps are possible and you can go from there. So yeah, as much as you all can encourage each other, I don't think it has to be exclusive to gender. But if all of us support each other in small ways, then it lightens the load for everybody.
Yeah. Exactly. And so we actually in the chat, we have, a couple of comments from some of the great leaders, female leaders in legal tech, including Julie Pearl and others. And it was there's too many questions to go through all of them, but one of them is, maybe I can read out from Carolina, who says, "Hi, Alana. I'd like to inquire about your thoughts on overcoming imposter syndrome for women in, I guess it's STEM industry and academia."
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, Sorry, all of a sudden everything went silent and I was like, what happened?
Oh, sorry. Did you get a question?
Becoming in STEM industry or academic? Well, that's a pretty broad. I mean, I think that this is all a step-by-step thing, and I would say it has to happen at different levels. I think if we can partner with administration generally where we have ins and bring it, whether it's through light training courses on biases or guests that highlight issues like this, where we make the environment more conducive to this and open up the dialogue, I think it then paves the way for individuals to speak up more in meetings, speak up more in class, right? Offer their contributions and volunteer more at the personal level. But it's very hard if we only leave it up to the individuals. That means that certain people have to bear the load on top of whatever is their academic or other load and their responsibilities. And I've seen that really burn out those people. So what I would generally try to do is look for a two-parter approach, where somehow a bunch of people could help work on the environment, and then it makes it easier for the individuals and for all individuals to be part of the difference. Feel free to connect with me. I'll pop my email in now.
Yes, please. I was just going to ask you, and yeah, thank you so much, Alana. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and thank you, Tammy and Chase, also for your great presentations. I thought it was a really amazing session today. Great presentations, great questions. Very much enjoyed having you join us for our group meeting. So a quick round of applause on behalf of everyone. And thank you again. And yeah, look forward to staying in touch. And I hope you have a great rest of your week, everyone. All right, see you all soon.